The first breath of daylight crept across the red mesas, turning cold stone into burning copper. The desert had not yet stirred. Even the wind held its breath. High above the valley floor, a lone Apache warrior sat cross-legged upon the sandstone ridge, as still as the ancient cliffs themselves. Chayton had been there for 3 days and nights without food, without fire, seeking guidance as his ancestors had before him. Hunger gnawed at his body, but strength, the kind born of discipline and spirit, held him upright. A hawk wheeled overhead, silent against the pale morning sky. Its shadow passed across Chayton's face like a warning. His heart tightened. The desert did not speak in clear words, but in signs. Flight of birds, restless dust, uneasy silence. Something was moving in the world, shifting like thunder beneath the earth. He rose, slow but steady, dust falling from his skin as if the mountain released him only reluctantly. His bow and spear lay beside him. He took them up, feeling their familiar weight. On his chest hung a pouch of cedar and eagle feathers, blessed by the old wise men before he climbed here. He pressed it to his forehead. "Spirits," he whispered to the wind. "Walk with me." The wind answered in a low sigh through the canyon. His horse waited at the base of the ridge, a strong paint stallion with steady eyes and a spirit as wild as the desert. Stormfoot stamped the ground, sensing the tension in the air, and Chayton laid a calming hand on his neck. "We ride home," he murmured. "There is much to do." He mounted and rode hard across the open land. Yucca and sage blurred past. Dust rose in pale clouds behind him. The sky grew brighter, but with it came a heaviness, as though the land itself braced for something unwelcome. Chayton felt it in his bones, the same way one feels the breath before a storm breaks. At the hidden entrance to the valley, an Apache lookout lifted a hand in greeting. The narrow pass twisted like a serpent between stone walls, leading into the heart of the tribe's home. When Chayton entered, several warriors were already gathered near the central fire pit. Smoke drifted upward, straight and thin, a sign of steady air but unsettled ground. Faces turned toward him. No one spoke until Chief Ten Bears stepped forward. The old man's hair fell in long gray braids. Raven feathers decorated his headband. His gaze was sharp, strong despite decades of war and winter. "You return from the mountain," he said, voice calm and deep. "With what vision?" Chayton dismounted and offered a respectful nod. "Darkness moves, Chief, not in the sky and on the earth. Riders gather. Their hearts burn with greed. Their hands seek our horses, our water, our land." A murmur spread among the warriors. Brows furrowed. Hands tightened on spears. The desert bred strength, but it also bred enemies. Rival bands hungry for land and pride, eager to claim what they could steal rather than earn. An elder with scars across his cheek leaned forward. "Did you see them with your eyes or only with your spirit?" "I saw signs. Tracks in dry riverbeds, carrion birds circling where none should be, night fires on distant hills." Chayton paused. "And I heard the spirit's whisper of blood on sand." Some warriors shifted uneasily. Others stood taller, trusting him without doubt. Chayton's word carried weight. He had proven himself in battle and in wisdom more than once. One skeptical young warrior stepped forward, chin high. "Visions and whispers cannot cut flesh. If danger is real, show us proof." Chayton met his eyes, neither angered nor shaken. "Proof walks toward us. If we wait for it to arrive at our door, it will be too late." Chief Ten Bears lifted a hand, silencing further challenge. "Chayton has never spoken without truth." "We listen." The chief turned to the gathering. "Prepare. Ready the scouts. Strengthen the horses. Sharpen arrows and mines. If the storm comes, we meet it standing." Warriors nodded, some with silent grimness, others with fierce determination. The Apache did not flee danger. They faced it with calm hearts and steady hands. Chayton felt weight lift slightly from his chest. Not gone, but shared. He moved to the edge of the camp where the cedar trees grew and knelt in the dust. Warriors filed past him, placing hands briefly on his shoulder, honoring his vision, honoring the burden he carried. When they dispersed, Chayton remained alone, breathing slow, feeling the earth beneath his palms. The ground felt alive, restless, like something stirred deep within it. Stormfoot grazed nearby, tail flicking, ears twitching at sounds unseen. Chayton whispered to the land, not as a plea but as a promise. "I will not let danger take root here. This ground holds our fathers. The wind carries our songs. As long as my breath remains, no enemy shall darken this valley." A raven cried in the distance, sharp, sudden, cutting through still air. Chayton lifted his eyes. On the far horizon, faint and thin but unmistakable, a column of dust rose into the blue morning sky. Riders, many, moving fast. The storm he had felt was no longer coming. It had arrived. Chayton stood, hand closing around his spear, and the land, silent for so long, seemed to pulse beneath his feet like a drum preparing for war. Dust still lingered in the air long after the raven's cry faded. Chayton did not move at once. A warrior acts quickly but never without clarity. He studied the rising dust on the horizon, thin at first, then widening as if the land itself exhaled danger. His jaw tightened. There was no mistaking it now. Riders were advancing, steadily and without hesitation. The threat he had seen in vision was no longer shadow or omen. It had taken form. Stormfoot stamped the ground, nostrils flaring. The stallion felt it too, fear and adrenaline flickering inside him like distant lightning. Chayton placed a hand on the horse's neck, grounding both of them. "It begins," he murmured. Without turning, he felt another presence approach, swift footsteps but not rushed, disciplined, trained. Ataza appeared at his side, tall, lithe, and sharp-eyed. A close brother not by blood but by bond and battle. He carried a bow across his back and a long knife at his belt. "You see it?" Taza said, though it was not a question. Chayton nodded. "Riders many." Taza's gaze fixed on the horizon. "How long?" "By sundown, scouts will be near our borders. By tomorrow, they will test our ground." Taza said nothing for a moment. Then he inhaled deeply. "We should not wait for them to choose where to strike. We will not." Chayton looked toward the heart of the valley. "Gather Kola and Nantan. We move as hawks, quiet, watching, unseen." Taza nodded once and left without another word. The village was already shifting. Warriors sharpened arrowheads with obsidian flakes. Others led horses to drink and tightened rawhide over shields. Spears were tested, bows strung, quivers filled. Fire pits smoked with cedar and sage, not for comfort but cleansing of spirit and preparing the heart for battle. Chayton walked through them, neither hurried nor hesitant. Eyes followed him, not out of fear but trust. Warriors touched fists to their chests as he passed, acknowledging what lay ahead. He returned the gesture with equal respect. Courage fed courage. Near the east ridge he found Nantan, a quiet tracker whose footfalls made less sound than a fox in snow. Beside him stood Kola, broader, heavier, his strength apparent in every line of his frame. They straightened as Chayton approached. "Enemy riders close," Chayton told them. "We scout from the high pass." Kola cracked his knuckles once, expression hardening. "Good. Let them believe we hide. We strike like stone falling from mountain." Nantan merely nodded, eyes glinting like obsidian in firelight. Taza returned with his bow in hand. The four warriors stood together, the air heavy around them. No ceremony, no loud words, and only silent understanding. The ground beneath their feet seemed to hum with resolve. They mounted their horses and rode out a hidden exit of the valley, through a path so narrow the wind itself must turn sideways to slide through. Once clear, they fanned out, riding low and swift, keeping to ridges and brush. Apache scouts moved not as men but as part of the land, unseen until they chose otherwise. Hours passed beneath the growing heat. Lizards darted under rock. Vultures circled on rising thermals. The riders slowed when the crest of a mesa came into view. Chayton signaled and all dismounted. They left the horses behind a low rise and continued on foot, moving like wolves through scrub and stone. Upon reaching the edge, they crouched low. Below, across a flat stretch of desert, the enemy moved like a dark river. Horses kicked dust into the sky, spears glinted, war paint streaked their faces. Riders gathered in clusters, scouts scanning the land, and near the center rode a tall man draped in wolf hide, hair braided with bone. Black Wolf, a leader known for fierce raids and relentless hunger for land. Chayton felt the air tighten around him. Kola's hand clenched around his knife. "He comes with many." "More than expected," Nantan murmured. Taza leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Too many to fight in open ground." Chayton breathed steady and deep. "Then we will not fight in open ground." Their enemy paused at a rocky outcrop, studying the land as if searching for something unseen. Chayton recognized the gesture, a leader scenting the edges of another's territory. The wind carried a faint murmur from the riders. Not words, but the rising hum of men readying for war. Taza spoke low. "He means to strike quickly. He means to take our water," Chayton answered, eyes fixed on Black Wolf. "To weaken us and claim our horses." Nantan touched the earth, then rubbed dust between his fingers. "Tracks show they came from dry lands. Their mouths thirst. Thirst brings desperation," Chayton said, "and desperation brings recklessness." Kola grinned without humor. "Recklessness can be turned against a man. We will make sure of it." For a long moment they watched in silence. Ravens perched on stone spires nearby, feathers ruffling in the wind. The riders below did not see the four warriors above. They did not feel eyes upon them like the eyes of the mountain spirits, but the land felt everything. Chayton finally rose. "We return. The tribe must prepare not for fear, but for strategy." Taza nodded. "We bring shadow upon them before they bring fire upon us." As they turned to leave, Chayton paused at the edge of the mesa and spoke softly, not to his companions, but to the spirits carried on the desert wind. "The land remembers every foot that trespasses. Let it remember theirs." Then he walked away, silent and sure, the others at his back. Behind them, the desert waited. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching long across the sand like dark fingers reaching toward the valley. Tomorrow would bring blood and dust, but tonight preparation, not panic, readiness. Quiet, sharpened courage. War was coming. The land had whispered it. The spirits had shown it, and Chayton would meet it not with dread, but with calm, steady resolve. The tribe would not fall. Not while he drew breath. The sun sank behind the red ridges by the time the four warriors returned to the valley. The air cooled, but tension hung thick as smoke from a war drum fire. The tribe sensed the nearness of danger. Horses paced restlessly. Warriors oiled bowstrings and sharpened spear points, and elders murmured low prayers into the wind, offering sage to the earth with steady hands. Chayton dismounted and walked toward the center fire. Warriors turned to face him, not with fear, but with that quiet intensity that comes when a tribe stands on the edge of battle. Chief 10 Bears approached, his staff in hand, feathers rustling softly. "You saw them," the chief said, voice calm but deep with gravity. "We saw many," Chayton answered. "More than expected. Black Wolf leads them." A ripple passed through the group. Black Wolf was not a name spoken casually. He was ruthless, cunning, a leader forged in hard land and harder winters, a man who believed territory was earned by blood and kept by force. One of the older warriors, Tall Elk, stepped forward, gripping his shield. "Black Wolf comes for horses, water, pride." Chayton nodded. "He thirsts, not only for water but for power. He seeks to take what is not his." "What numbers?" Chief 10 Bears asked. "Enough to think he already owns the land," Taza replied, his voice like flint scraping stone. Kola's jaw tightened, "but not enough to know the land he walks into." Nantan added quietly, "They are tired from distance. Their horses breathe heavy. Their water is low." Chayton raised a hand slightly, not to silence but to gather focus. "They march fast, too fast. They expect resistance but not strategy. They believe numbers alone bring victory." Chief 10 Bears stared into the fire for a long moment. Flames reflected in his old eyes like memories of battles long past. "They will come by dawn?" "By first light," Chayton confirmed. "They will scout tonight. We must be shadows. They cannot know how prepared we are." The chief nodded slowly. "Then we do not meet them at the mouth of the valley?" "No," Chayton said. "We choose the place where the land becomes our ally." He gestured toward the cliffs that curved like a stone jaw around the eastern side. "The last water ridge, the narrow path. One horse at a time. Their numbers become nothing there." A murmur of approval passed among the warriors. Many nodded. Others tightened grips on weapons. Apache did not rely on strength alone. They were hunters, thinkers, silent tacticians of the wild. Chief 10 Bears lifted his staff. "Then it is decided. We defend not as prey but as mountain cats, unseen until the strike." Preparations began with quiet, efficient motion. No raised voices, no panic. Only purpose. Warriors gathered arrows and placed stone traps along narrow passages. Others knelt beside horses, whispering calm into their ears, as if they too were part of the tribe's plan. Chayton walked to the edge of the village where the river trickled softly through cottonwood and juniper. The sound of water in the growing dark brought clarity. He knelt, dipped his hands and pressed the coldness to his face. A shadow moved behind him, not threatening, familiar. Taza sat beside him, folding his legs without speaking for a long time. Silent, stretched, comfortable, respectful. "We have seen battles," Taza said at last, "but never one like this." Chayton stared into the water, watching moonlight ripple. "Every battle feels new until it begins. Then it is only breath and instinct." "You think Black Wolf fears death?" Taza asked. "He fears weakness," Chayton replied. "That makes him dangerous but blind." Taza nodded slowly. "Blind men walk into pits, and proud men walk into arrows," Chayton said. They shared a glance, grim, steady, unshaken. Kola approached next, carrying church stones for arrowheads. "We will meet them as ghosts meet the living." Nantan followed silently, placing fresh-cut cedar branches before the water. A quiet offering. He did not speak, but his presence spoke enough. Commitment, loyalty, readiness. A soft drum beat began in the village. Slow, controlled. Not a drum for celebration, but a heartbeat for the land, reminding every warrior who he was, where he stood and who stood beside him. Chayton rose. "Tonight we rest in spirit. Our bodies stay sharp, but our minds must be still." Kola chuckled once in humor without joy. "If I sleep, it will be with one eye open." "You sleep with both eyes open," Taza replied flatly, and even Chayton's mouth curved slightly. The small thread of humor settled nerves. Warriors did not laugh to forget war. They laughed to face it stronger. The night moved on. Fires burned low. Stars filled the black sky like 1,000 watchful ancestors. The smell of sage drifted through camp. Spears, bows, knives, shields, all ready. But more important, hearts were ready. Chayton lay on the earth, staring upward. He did not sleep, but he rested, body still, breath steady. The wind carried distant sounds. Not animal, not branch, not river. Faint hoofbeats far across the desert. The enemy was moving. He turned his head slightly. Taza lay nearby, eyes open, alert. Nantan sat cross-legged, silent as stone. Kola rolled his shoulders, restless but steady. Without a word, Chayton rose. His brothers rose with him. The night had shifted. The world held its breath. Tomorrow would bring battle, spear against spear, spirit against hunger. But tonight belonged to patience, to quiet strength, to warriors who knew that endurance before dawn was as important as fury after sunrise. Chayton looked toward the distant horizon where darkness met starlight. "We stand," he whispered. And in the stillness, the earth seemed to answer, a low tremor in the soil. Not fear, but readiness. The tribe slept. The warriors did not. Morning would come soon, and with it, war. The first pale streak of dawn crept along the horizon, turning the desert floor silver. The valley lay silent, the village still. But at the eastern ridge, where stone narrowed into a throat of rock and sand, Apache warriors waited in stillness older than empire or steel. Chayton crouched behind a slab of sandstone, fingers resting lightly on the earth. The ground spoke in subtle tremors, distant hooves, many moving in hungry rhythm. His breath was steady, heartbeat slow, his mind like stagnant pond water. Calm, undisturbed, waiting for the first ripple. Taza knelt to his right with bow drawn, eyes hooded, unreadable. Kola crouched lower, gripping his spear so hard the wood creaked. Nantan blended with stone itself, still as a coiled snake, knife and short bow ready. Behind them, more warriors lay hidden, 20 men, silent as carved obsidian. No words, no war cries. Silence was their shield, patience their blade. The desert wind shifted, carrying the distant grunt of horses, the clink of metal, and voices riding hard breath. Scouting riders, searching, testing the edges of the valley like wolves scenting a cave entrance. A raven flew overhead, flapping once before gliding east. A sign. Chayton exhaled once through his nose. The riders were close now. Dust rose faintly along the low ridge beyond the pass. One scout appeared first, a lone figure on a gray horse, face painted in bone-white streaks. He paused, scanning the cliffs. A trained fighter. His gaze lingered on the narrow passage, suspicion sharpening his eyes like flint. Chayton watched the scout's breathing shift. He sensed danger. He was right to suspect, wrong to stay. The scout nudged his horse forward slow steps. Hooves thudded softly on compact earth. The stallion snorted uneasy. Animals felt fear faster than men. Chayton did not draw his bow yet. Not for one man. The desert demanded patience. But the scout leaned forward, hand moving toward signal horn. Taza moved before breath had time to change. One arrow, one whisper in air, one death. The scout slumped soundless, horn still in hand, body falling into the dust without a cry. His horse remained still, trained and frightened. Chayton motioned, quick, sharp. Two warriors rushed forward, dragging body and horse into shadow. Silence again. The wind returned to whispering over rock. Moments later, 3 more riders appeared, searching for their missing scout. Their pace was cautious, not blind charge, not yet. They spread apart, scanning shadows, bows ready. This time Chayton lifted his hand, then lowered it. The signal arrows rose from hidden stone like black feathers poised to fly. Then with perfect unity they fell. 3 bodies hit the earth almost together. Only one had time to gasp. Not enough to warn, not enough to pray. Horses bolted briefly before being seized and quieted. Stillness returned. But dust over the horizon thickened. The main group had noticed absence. The real test would come now. Minutes stretched long and tight like rawhide pulled for bowstring. Then came the sound. The full force of Black Wolf's war band approaching. War cries split the morning air, harsh and hungry. Hooves thundered. Spears flashed. Rage moved like fire toward the narrow throat of stone. Chayton whispered to his warriors, low and calm. Let them believe madness brings victory. We fight where their size becomes weakness. The first wave burst forward. 10 riders forcing their way into the passage, believing speed meant dominance. A mistake. The path allowed only 2 side by side. Too tight, too confined. The first warrior who entered did not exit. Chayton's spear struck like lightning, ripping him from horse before he could lift shield. Taza's arrows followed, silent and merciless. Kola leapt like a mountain cat, dragging one man from saddle and breaking him against stone. Nantan slit another's throat before he could scream. Bodies choked the passage. Horses reared, confused, unable to turn. Riders trapped behind shouted in frustration, pushing forward helplessly. Apache warriors melted back into shadow, letting stone and chaos fight for them. Black Wolf's men tried to reorganize, yelling orders, shoving corpses aside. But every breath they spent struggling through the choke was another moment Apache eyes watched. Patient, calculating. When the second push began, Kola tossed a smoking bundle into the narrow path. Sage and dry fiber set aflame. Smoke billowed, blinding horses, choking riders. Confusion turned to panic. One man fired blindly, hitting his own ally. Chayton surged forward again, spear thrust low into horse's flank, sending beast collapsing sideways, crushing 2 riders at once. Arrows rained. Knives flashed. Bones snapped. But Black Wolf himself had not yet entered battle. He held back, tactical, not foolish. He expected sacrifice. He watched, learning Apache positions, mapping shadows in his mind. He raised his hand. A horn blew, long, deep, commanding retreat of the forward press. His warriors pulled back, dragging wounded, snarling not in fear but anger. Smoke thinned. Silence followed. Only the moans of injured men and the scent of blood stirred the air. Chayton watched Black Wolf studying the battlefield from the open sand. Hard eyes, patient like predator. Not reckless now. Dangerous in discipline. The standoff held. Neither side spoke. Only the land breathed. Black Wolf lifted his spear high, then drove it into the ground, a message. He would not leave. He would not surrender thirst or pride. Chayton understood. This was not victory. It was only first cut. The wolf would circle and test again. Taza spoke softly beside him. He learns. Chayton nodded once. So do we. Kola spat blood from a cut lip. Let him come until his bones join the sand. Nantan only wiped his blade clean. Black Wolf turned his horse, barking orders. His men regrouped further out, forming tight formation, choosing new approach. They were not leaving. They were rethinking. Chayton's heart thudded, slow but heavy. The battle had begun. It would not end quickly. It would not end without sacrifice. But today they had held ground. Today the tribe still breathed freely. He looked toward the valley behind him, safe for now. Then back at the enemy, coiled, waiting. Tomorrow they would clash again, and the desert would judge all men by blood, courage, and patience. Chayton whispered to the wind, voice steady, as the sun rose fully and warmed battle-soaked earth. Let them come again. We remain. The horizon trembled like a drum waiting for the next strike. The war for the valley. The dawn after the battle came slow, dragging light across a land scarred by struggle. Smoke curled like thin ghosts from burned brush, and the scent of gunpowder still clung to the air. The plains, once silent and vast, now bore the marks of men who fought for breath and land. Hoof prints cut deep, arrows shattered in soil, blood darkening patches of earth. Chayton stood alone atop a ridge just beyond the battleground. The wind tugged at his braids and carried sand across his boots. Below, warriors of his people moved in solemn silence, gathering arrows, tending to wounded brothers, blessing the dead. No cheers rose, no drums sounded. Victory did not sing, though they had survived. Survival is quiet, he had always believed. Death makes noise, life whispers. His spear rested upright beside him, tip stained dark from the night's fight. Stormfoot grazed a few paces away, occasionally lifting his head as if guarding his warrior even now. Chayton's body bore fresh cuts and bruises, but the fire in his chest burned steady. The ancestors had guided him. His people still walked this earth. That was enough. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. Lone Eagle came forward, his arm bandaged, face hard but proud. "Many brothers yet breathe because of you," Lone Eagle said. Voice gravel and wind. "The earth will remember." Chayton shook his head. "I only followed what the spirits placed in my path. Every warrior who stood last night carries the honor." "Still," Lone Eagle replied, placing a hand over his heart, "when future fires burn and young men ask how the valley survived, they will speak your name." Names meant little to Chayton, but the land meant everything. He looked to the horizon where sun met stone. A hawk soared there, riding the warm winds rising from the new day. It circled once, twice, a quiet watcher. He watched back. "You saw the ridge?" Lone Eagle asked, nodding to the battlefield below. Chayton nodded. "They tried to circle like wolves, thought the canyon would shelter them, and instead it swallowed them." Chayton said nothing. He remembered the cry of the hawk, the flash of metal in moonlight the moment he chose to flank rather than stand in the circle, a single breath of decision that saved lives. But the faces of those who had fallen still weighed on him, brave brothers who would not see another sunrise. Thundercloud approached next, leaning on his spear but walking strong despite gashes across his chest. The wounded are tended, the dead prepared. This ground will know our sorrow and pride. Chayton turned to face them both. "We will bury them with honor. No man's spirit will wander lost." "And the invaders?" Thundercloud asked. "Those who fell lie where they chose to stand. Those who fled will not return soon." Chayton's voice held no rage, only certainty. But danger walks on two legs. It finds its way again. Lone Eagle nodded grimly. "Then we watch, as hawks watch the plains." Chayton looked at the sky again. The hawk had disappeared into the rising light, as if satisfied. Before he could speak, two knives approached carrying bundles of arrows. His sharp eyes scanned the horizon constantly. Tracks lead south. Small group escaped. They move like frightened deer. "Deer can turn to wolves if hunger drives them back," Thundercloud muttered. Chayton replied quietly, "We heal first, then we prepare again." The three warriors shook wrists, Apache grip of brothers, before returning to their tasks. Chayton remained a moment longer. Hours later, the final rituals were complete. Fires burned sage and cedar, smoke cleansing the ground and guiding spirits upward. Warriors stood silent as the last mound of earth was set atop the final resting place of their brothers. No tears fell. Apache tears stayed inside, feeding strength. But hearts felt heavy as stone. When the last prayer was spoken, Chief Ten Bears stepped beside Chayton. His steps slow but sure, eyes calm as rivers in drought. "The valley stands because you listened," he said. "To the wind, to the hawk, to the land. A warrior is not only muscle and blade. You have proven it." "I am only one among brothers," Chayton replied. "Yes, one among brothers, but one who carried the sharp sight of the hawk, the patience of mountains, the fire of lightning." The chief looked out over the land. "Our tribe breathes because of hearts like yours, and the earth will carry your steps long after your body is smoke." Chayton took in a slow breath. "Our path continues. It always does," the chief murmured. "The world changes. We change with it or we are swept like leaves." Chayton felt the truth settle inside him. Battle would come again in days, in moons, in years. But as long as the Apache heart beat, the land would not be claimed by another spirit. The chief turned to leave, then paused. Rest now, Hawkson. Even eagles fold wings before the next flight. Chayton nodded. He walked toward Stormfoot, pressing a hand to the horse's neck. We ride again soon, he whispered. Stormfoot whickered softly as if in agreement. Chayton mounted but did not yet leave. He guided Stormfoot to a high ridge overlooking the plains. There he sat, spear raised upright, a silent guardian. The wind brushed past, carrying the scent of cedar and dust, and voices older than time. He closed his eyes. A whisper moved through the air. Strength. Vigilance. Honor. He opened them, gaze sharp and far-reaching. The valley below shimmered in sunlight. Smoke from ritual fires rose thin and steady. American eagles circled overhead. No enemies marched. No thunder of hooves. Only quiet breath of earth, for now, peace. Chayton lifted his spear to the sky, letting the sun reflect off the blade. A pledge without words. So long as breath lived in his chest, the Apache would stand. So long as his feet touched the red soil, enemies would think twice before crossing it. So long as hawks soared above the mesas, the spirits would walk beside him. He lowered the spear, eyes forward, unblinking. A warrior born, a guardian chosen, a son of the land eternal. The story of Chayton did not end here. It only carved its first sacred mark in stone. For land lives, and warriors rise, and the mountain never bows.